Hello, everyone. This is a bit of an impromptu live stream because of all of this mad Mohammed Kudus news that has popped up in the last half an hour or so. So I thought I'd just jump on and see what you guys are thinking at home. Yeah, lots of reports, different reports, but all among the kind of same idea that Tottenham are getting closer to getting Mohammed Kudus away from West Ham. It would be the first deal that Spurs have done with West Ham since 2011. And some reports suggesting that maybe Vinay coming in as our new CEO might help grease the wheels towards potentially doing deals with clubs that we haven't done deals with recently, basically maybe taking over from Daniel Levy in those kind of boardroom meetings, so that some of those clubs that have refused to deal with Spurs, for instance, over the last number of years, Chelsea, West Ham, Arsenal, may now be more willing to deal with us, as Vinay is going to be the kind of face of those negotiations. That is one of the kind of reasons people are suggesting that maybe West Ham might be willing to sell Mohammed Kudus to us. Now, one of the questions I want to talk to you guys about when it comes to Mohammed Kudus is not only, I think it's fair to say we would all agree that Mohammed Kudus is an excellent footballer, like a real baller, such a talent, so quick and willing to take players on. And in terms of his ability in terms of him suiting Tottenham on that basis, then yes, it would work. But I worry, how is it going to work out with Mohammed Kudus and Thomas Frank's no dickhead policy? Because I texted one of my friends who's a West Ham fan about this in the last week, and he said that basically in the last season, West Ham fans have kind of gone off Mohammed Kudus because he basically downed tools. So I don't know. Let me know what you think about that. But in the comments so far, Chris Robb says, "Hi Barnaby, Sai's going to go well. Says, can you wish me luck for my driving exam when I failed the first time? Yes, good luck. You won't fail again." Says, my luck works because I wish you luck for a new home in the Netherlands and you found one. Zanidin says, won't believe it until he wears the Spurs jersey. And that's fair enough. Let's go through some of the reports while I've got some of you on here. So Mohammed Kudus, one of Spurs' leading targets, has a belief within the club that he can get his goal scoring into double figures, and his versatility is also valued. Kudus is believed to be open to making the move. Also, Tottenham won't revive their Antoine Semenyo interest unless Bournemouth's price tag of at least £65 million is lowered. Now, that's an interesting one for me, because the reports are that Kudus's release clause that is open for the first, I think, 10 days of July is somewhere around £80 million, but that Tottenham think they could get him down to 60. And then some of the reports now saying that Tottenham wouldn't go to 65 million for Antoine Semenyo. Now, I think Semenyo is a bit of a safer bet than Kudus, just based on the fact that, like I said, West Ham fans kind of really don't like Kudus after he basically downed tools in the last season. Apparently, Mohammed Kudus has 2 release clauses in his contract: £85 million for Premier League clubs, 120 million for Saudi clubs. There is, of course, the possibility that all this is coming out because West Ham are trying to provoke a bidding war, of course. But there have been reports in the last week or two that Tottenham have been waiting until July, which of course starts tomorrow, till the new financial year, to then push forward with a number of bids and a number of potential signing options. Kudus does like to play off the right. Sabir says this, actually, good time. He's an upgrade on Johnson. Of course, I'd like this famous football club acquiring Eza, but can't see that happening. Cantab asks, can Kudus play as a 10? Well, according to some of these reports, one of the things Tottenham really like about Kudus is his versatility. It's the Guardian who've really gone big on this with an entire article. So I'm going to read this to you. It says as follows. The headline is West Ham open to 60 million Kudus offer from Tottenham to ease PSR pressure. Also worth remembering that today is the last day of PSR. So if West Ham really do need to sell to get through PSR problems, then maybe that is why these reports are all coming out now. Jacob Steenberg, very reliable journalist, says this. West Ham's need to rebuild their squad without breaching the Premier League's profit and sustainability regulations could lead them to sell Mohammed Kudus to Tottenham if their London rivals offer enough for the forward. Spurs have identified Kudus as a key target, and there is a feeling that he'll be available for less than his £85 million release clause, which is applicable to Premier League sides for the first 10 days of July. There is no asking price, but there is a sense that £60 million could be enough to get a deal done. I'll just say separately that a lot of the reports coming out in the last half hour suggest that Tottenham had a bid for Kudus of £50 million rejected in the past week. And now West Ham seemingly leaking to the press that £60 million might be enough. Sources inside West Ham who know the club well say money is extremely tight. West Ham are adamant that they must sell to buy and have long known that selling Kudus is the best way to give their head coach Graham Potter funds to improve his ageing squad. They would prefer not to sell to Spurs given the enmity between the clubs, but are willing to be pragmatic. Kudus would be the first West Ham player to join Spurs since Scotty Parker in 2011. And actually, in the end, I'd say that Scott Parker deal was good for Spurs. He was, slightly memed for his constant want to do 360s on the ball, but he was a good player, Scott Parker. And actually, Tottenham could do worse than having a Scott Parker at number 6 at the moment. Anyway, the article goes on. It's understood that West Ham will be at risk of falling foul of PSR if incomings are not offset by significant sales. They are keen to shift big earners such as Edson Alvarez, Naif Aguard, Nicholas Fulkrug. Hopes of bringing in big money for Lucas Paqueta have been dashed by the Football Association's investigation into his alleged betting breaches. Potter is comfortable with the idea of selling Kudus because the Ghanaian struggled last season and is at his best on the right, the same position as West Ham's captain and most important player, Jared Bowen. Kudus has also attracted interest from Chelsea, Newcastle and Manchester United. Chelsea like that the 24-year-old can play in 3 positions across the attack, but it remains to be seen whether they sign another forward after agreeing deals for Jamie Gittins and João Pedro. This is something I just want to grab into here, guys, which is, and I was mentioning this earlier to my friend Joey, who was, telling me how frustrated he is that Spurs haven't bought anyone. I have been wondering whether there is also an element of Tottenham basically, and not only Tottenham, but waiting for those clubs who are just going to hoover up all the players they want, all the young players, to kind of basically do their deals, and then Spurs try and get their pick from the best of the rest. Because frankly, and I don't like admitting it or saying it, but it's true, if Chelsea are in for a player with us, we're not going to get that player. If Arsenal are in for a player with us, we're not going to get that player. It's just a fact based on the last few years. That's the reality. And the reality of not only are they going to pay more wages, which I'm hopeful Tottenham will improve as we go on down over the next 5 years, but also that those players will go to think of those clubs as having more of an opportunity to win the Premier League or the Champions League. It goes on. Kudus impressed after joining West Ham from Ajax for £37 million 2 years ago. He shone in his first season, but endured a difficult second campaign. He clashed with Julian Lopetegui, more to talk about than with our no dickheads rule, before the Spaniard sacking in January, and scored only 4 goals. West Ham admire Kudus' talent, but wonder whether he fits in Potter's system and believe a sale will help their rebuild. Spurs have not been put off by Kudus getting sent off against them and receiving a 5-match ban. Yeah, we should talk about that as well, because remember that big scrap he got in with about 3 Spurs players. Their new manager, Thomas Frank, is looking for attacking reinforcements and is likely to lose out to Man United in the race to sign his former player at Brentford, Brian Mbeumo. Spurs are known to be looking at Antoine Semenyo and Eberechi Essa, who is also admired by Arsenal. Of course, more reports today came out that Arsenal had apparently reached out to Eberechi Eza's representatives over the past weekend. So let's see what you guys are saying about that. Cantab says 55 million plus 5 million add-ons, ? I wonder if it would be more like 60 million. Geek Jinx says, what's the source for this? Seems like the wind-up of the day. Right, so I just read that article from The Guardian, but it's not only The Guardian source. There's quite a few kind of reputable leaks coming out. And for me, and I've talked about this before, I feel like when transfers are kind of getting closer or when clubs are looking to stoke up a bidding war and are kind of resigned to the fact that their player is going to leave, then it's kind of almost like the reputable journos all get the news around the same time and all start releasing that news around the same time. So that is the kind of feeling I get around Kudus at the moment. I have to say, I've been saying for last week, and I stick to this, I'm not sure about Kudus. I'm not. I like him as a player. I think he's a fantastically talented footballer. Of course he is. But in terms of him fitting in with Thomas Frank's no dickhead policy, I'm just fearful of like what I just said about how he fell out with Lopetegui, about how when I spoke to my West Ham fan friend, he said that basically West Ham fans have gone off him over the last year because he seems to have downed tools. And what we don't need, I think, at Spurs is a player who, sure, maybe he'll have a good start, ideally, but then likes the idea of maybe getting another big move too quickly, in like after the first year or two. So that's what I'm a bit wary of, but maybe that's just me being extra cynical. Hot God 10 says, good afternoon, everyone. Transfer market states he can play as a left wing, but as a 10 as well, but favors the right wing so he can cut in on his left foot. Yeah, one thing I would say is, in terms of, if you think about maybe the possibility of Dejan Kulusevski being the backup and rotation option with James Maddison in a kind of 10 role, then we would, in that instance, need more options on the right flank. And certainly in terms of being a different option to Brennan Johnson on the right flank, Kudus is definitely that. He's far more explosive. He's far more willing to just drive at players with the ball kind of quite close to his feet. So on that basis, you could see why they'd be interested, that's for sure. Eddie says, Chelsea really so surprised. Gary Rossell, yeah, says, Frank hasn't even met the squad yet. Everyone needs to calm down. That's true, but I don't think necessarily that means, there won't be any signings. I mean, it's been proven that with the Kota Takai signing, the Japanese boys signing. So it doesn't mean that there won't be signings. And especially if Tottenham are worried that they'll get outbid again, as it looks like we have been with Mbeumo and potentially Eze, if any of those rumours with Arsenal are. Let's see what else we got. Peter Chan allowing himself some excitement. God forbid we get Kudus and Eze, brackets, I'm dreaming. Do we have a shout to win the league? No, I wouldn't say we'd have a shout at winning the league. I think that would be a bit strong. But I've been saying for the last month or two that I do think whatever happens, we're going to be quite close to back where we were in Ange's first season, quite close to that kind of top 5 spot. And I think if we got those in, if we got a couple of players of the caliber, by which I mean, I'm going to say the caliber of Dominic Solanke, by which I mean players who've proven it in the Premier League already, have a good attitude, and really want this to be the kind of the main move of their career, kind of 25 years old to 30 years old, something like that, then I think we really could push towards that top 5. Cantab says Kudus is on £90,000 a week, I think. And Smokehouse feels strongly. No thank you to Kudus. Not sure if he has the correct mental strength. Don't want another Ndombele. Need to check out his suitability before splashing the cash. Remember the no dickheads rule. Yeah, that's what I was talking about. And that's my fear about it. I guess one thing, if I'm going to try and put a positive spin on it, you'd like to think that Thomas Frank will gauge it. Thomas Frank is a smart guy, clearly. And you'd like to think that he would gauge it in any conversations with any player that wants to come in. But yeah, I mean, I fear that as well, based on just talking to some West Ham friends and what they said about Kudus last year. So yeah, some of the reports saying that we had, like I said, we had a £50 million bid rejected last week. Personal terms apparently not an issue. And that West Ham are potentially willing to sell to Spurs for the first time since 2011. And I said at the beginning of this episode, I do wonder whether there's an element of, now that Vinay Venkatesham, is in as the CEO at Tottenham, whether that means that we are now kind of more dealable with in the transfer market. Maybe he is just a far better people person, negotiator, and less probably on the nose business-wise than Daniel Levy to have those kind of initial chats. And maybe that's why the likes of West Ham are pretty, maybe potentially more willing to deal with us. Raider275 says Kudus would be a good signing for us, in my opinion. He will have better players around him here. Yeah, I mean, I think he did really well in his first season. Certainly towards the end of the first season at West Ham when he moved from Ajax, a lot of people were talking about Kudus as one of the best signings of the year and potentially getting in the kind of Premier League team of the year. He's undoubtedly got the class and the talent. But if I was Thomas Frank, I would be, and Johan Lange and Vinay, frankly, I'd be saying to him, so what happened last season? Like, why did you drop off a cliff so much? What happened with you and Julian Lopetegui? Why did you fall out? What's the issue? But of course, over and above this, that will be dependent on whether we want to bring him in. But over and above that in the first place, we've got to look at why West Ham want to sell him as well. Obviously, there are reports they're struggling with PSR and they need to get some money in to allow Graham Potter to rebuild. And like I said earlier in that article I read, they see him as kind of in his best position being out wide on the right, which is also where Jared Bowen plays, and Jared Bowen's their captain, and he's unsellable basically. So there are those elements, but also, you know, are there reasons behind that? You know, are there things like the attitude issues? That would be a worry for me. I've got a super chat here from SSJ. Thank you so much. It says, once again, bring me Kudus with a kiss, and who cares? Are you talking about SSJ? Are you talking about who cares about personality and stuff like that? Let us know. Let us know. Let's see. Kulisevsky, thank you for your comment, mate. Appreciate it. Says it's like the food chain. Spurs are not tops. I've got to wait for the apex predators to hunt first and then go for what is left. Now, listen, I have to say, I think that is a brilliant comment. I really do, because it's true. And I'm afraid I know it's really hard to admit and hard to say, but it's just reality. Chelsea and Man City and Liverpool, and I'm afraid to say Man United, because of them being kind of a heritage, traditionally successful club, that footballers of this of the age of footballers in the Premier League at the moment, they grew up, you know, watching Man United, with Man United being the biggest club and best club. So those clubs are always going to have the first choices. So it might just be as simple as Mbeumo has gone, Eza might have gone as well. So we're down to the next name on our list, which is Kudus. That could be the reality. Ryan Gloria says, all talk, not even a single bid. That's not true. From everything I've heard, Spurs put in a bid of £50 million for Mohammed Kudus in the last week. That was rejected. And the talk coming out now is that West Ham are basically leaking that 60 million could be okay. But listen, I appreciate what you're saying, Ryan, and you know, no shade. I appreciate you watching and your engagement and stuff. But also, I'm going to say this. The reality is, I feel like coming to talk to you guys when this happens, because I get excited about potential signings as well. Like, I'm not an ITK. I don't know if it's going to happen or not. I'm just kind of basing it on my experience of when you read articles and when you see all of the kind of journos giving out the same messaging around the same time, you know, having, you know, watched football for a long time, that they're being leaked. You know, they're getting stories leaked by agents or by clubs, and there are reasons behind it. And it tends to be that kind of momentum often leads towards a signing. Now, one thing I'll say just to counteract that, and I'm always happy to play devil's advocate, is of course that Tottenham do more often than not these days under Johan Lange like to do their transfer work in the darkness. And a fair few times we've had transfers been done that we hadn't heard about before. So, you know, there's also that possibility. I guess it can work both ways. Geek Jinx says, I believe Frank can get 30 to 40% more out of the group Ange had. I agree. With being a better player coach. Ange could motivate a stone to swim, but tactics and player coaching is more Yeah, I agree. I think what I think Thomas Frank will really do is improve the players. Yeah, so maybe that's similar to what you're saying, getting 30 to 40% more out of them. I think it'll be more like he can improve them, maybe not 30 to 40%, but certainly kind of 10 to 15%, a lot of them, especially the young players. I really see Thomas Frank in that kind of mold for sure. But also I agree with what you're saying about Ange's motivational ability. But hopefully Thomas Frank kind of has that good kind of what I call Pochettino-esque mix of being able to improve players on the pitch, being able to coach them and make them understand how to become better elite Premier League players, but then also being able to motivate for the big games as well. Moran with a slightly different angle here. Why are we bailing out West Ham? Kudus is second tier, but they want tier 1 money. F that. I'd rather work with Bournemouth. Despite Semenyo maybe not fitting Frank's double pivot perfectly, he's a stud. I don't think Semenyo or Kudus are double pivot players. They're not kind of central midfield players like that. So I don't see that as an issue. Or just reading that Man United will potentially make a move to sign Ollie Watkins from Aston Villa. That's if Rasmus Højlund leaves. And a lot of talk that Inter Milan have been interested in Rasmus Højlund. And I also don't really see it as bailing out West Ham. And I don't feel, listen, I don't like West Ham and I don't like Arsenal or Chelsea. Like, that's a fact. But I do also, and have also over the last 10, 15 years, got a little bit frustrated and a little bit like irked that all of those clubs sell and buy, you know, they all sell to each other and buy off each other, but Tottenham don't. And I feel like it's been a weird mix of like Daniel Levy ego and maybe quite slightly misreading. Well, I'm going to say ego based on, let's give it as an example with Chelsea, based on the Willian situation from all those years back when we gave Willian his medical and we were trying to buy him from Shakhtar Donetsk, and then Chelsea just swooped in at the last, right? And I feel like probably Daniel Levy said, right, I'm never going to work with them again. And then in other situations with other clubs like Man United, as Alex Ferguson once said, when they had to work really hard to get Dimitar Berbatov over the line from Spurs. Alex Ferguson said, dealing with Daniel Levy is more painful than my hip operation, or my hip replacement, I think it was. So there's a little bit of, Daniel Levy being a difficult negotiator and a hard taskmaster when it comes to the business side of things. But also I think there's just been a little bit of ego in it as well. And maybe Daniel Levy having a little bit of like not wanting to piss off the fans by buying or selling from or to those kind of clubs. But I think it's stupid. I think we have to stop that now. And if there's an opportunity to get a good player, and I think Kudus is undoubtedly a good player, shall I say, I think he's undoubtedly an excellent player. But for me, it's whether can we get the most out of him if we buy him in terms of motivation? Can we make him really want to become a huge success at Tottenham Hotspur? I'm sure he'll be motivated by playing in the Champions League, that's for sure. But I don't want to buy a player who potentially then a season later has a good season, then thinks, I'm ready to take another step up. We need to get at least 3-4 seasons out of these players and sell them on at a profit if they are indeed then going to want to sell on. Listen, if a player comes to Spurs like Berbatov, like Modric, like Carrick, like Bale, if they come to Spurs and it works out over 4 or 5 years and they're brilliant and then they go on to a bigger club, you can't fight against that. I have no problem with that. And you get money for it, big money. But I don't want Kudus to come in and then after one season down tools like he did at West Ham. That's what I'm worried about. Look, when you say Kudus is second tier, I'm not going to wholly disagree with that, because that, again, for me, is a little bit of an element of we can't get the tier 1 players. I'm sorry, but and as painful as it is to admit it, like I said earlier, it's like those tier 1 players are going to City, Liverpool, Barcelona, Real Madrid, and then to a lesser degree, Arsenal and Manchester United above us. And unfortunately, if Newcastle are able to find a way around PSR, then Newcastle will soon be ahead of us as well, because they're going to be able to spend any wages they want. So it is, I'm afraid, in our transfer dealings, a bit of a matter of us trying to get the best players out of those second tier of players. That's just unfortunate. That's why we couldn't get Dean Howson, because he went from Bournemouth to Real Madrid. And that is another good example for me. And let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree, and it's subjective. But that's why, for me, Tottenham need to be doing what they've done with Takai, for instance, which is trying to get the player in earlier before they get the move to the team like Bournemouth, and trying to get them earlier, because otherwise they're going to go to Bournemouth for a season like Howson did and then get their move to Real Madrid. And so that's why, I think that's why we got Vuskovic, for instance, and Takai, and they realize that is the only strategy until Tottenham get some investment and are able to spend more in wages. That is the only strategy that is going to work for us. SSJ with another super chat, thanks so much, says, if Chelsea get him, we'd bitch and moan, just do it. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think I think Kudus would be an exciting Spurs-esque player. If we can be sure that his motivation and his desire to play for the club would be right, then I think he'd be an excellent player for us. Sanford says, let's have a look. Hold on. Okay. Kulu says he can play both wings, has pace, creativity, and end product. Nico says, is he really an upgrade from Johnson? Probably, but is it a priority? I believe personally that creativity is a priority. One thing I'd say about Ange is we did score a lot of goals, but I felt like our attacking was pretty one-dimensional. It was always about finding a way to the byline and cutbacks or balls across the front for Johnson to put in. And Johnson's elite at that, at the back post. But in terms of attacking in different ways from different positions and different angles, then Kudus for me does bring something that we don't really have. He also, I also think he has a lot of the elements that Wilson Odobert has in terms of acceleration, pace, liking to drive at players. But I think he's just further down in his development than Odobert. And if we had those two playing on opposite flanks or Tell on one, I think we would be a dangerous team to play against, that's for sure. Sanford says, I thought Kulu would be our Kudus. I think Kulusevski's a very different player. Kulusevski, when he plays a wide right, is a very different wide forward than either Johnson or Odobert or Tell or Kudus. He's more of a strength play, he's more of a craft player, a vision player. And it'll be really, fascinating. Listen, he's going to be injured for a bit by the looks of things, although there were some reports, as I think I mentioned in my video this morning, that maybe he won't be as injured for as long as we first feared. But I wonder if he will become the rotation option for alongside James Maddison in the number 10. And Kulu also says, rather gamble with him than the plain Janes we have on our wing at present. Well, one thing I'd say about the plain Janes in your views is they're all pretty young. Even Kulusevski's pretty young. So there we go. Let's have a look. Big Bad Rom says, no, Kudus is garbage. Okay, that's strong. Let's see what else other people are saying. HodGod10 says, it would be folly for the likes of Arsenal City to not want to speak to Eze. I'm almost 100% he'll be a Spurs player. Well, I hope you're right. Listen, if we got players of the ilk of Semenyo, Kudus, and an Eze in, I think we would be a very exciting team. This is an interesting one from Geek Jinx. Spurs' next window to win the league is 2028, I believe. Geek Jinx, let me know why you think that year in particular. Andrew says, I think we've all learned, do not believe anything until they're on a website and confirmed. Until then, let's enjoy our games of Club Call and Football Manager. Yeah, listen, mate, I do agree with you, Andrew, but also, like I said earlier, and I don't know if you were here for that, I get excited when I hear about potential signings. I think the summers are pretty boring. I've not any interest in the Club World Cup. And I do have interest in Tottenham hopefully having a much better league season next year than we did this season. So, you know, when there's some momentum behind a potential signing like there has been this afternoon for Kudus, I just wanted to talk to some other Spurs fans about it. So it's been good to chat to you guys in the comments, that's for sure. Big Bad Rom, this is giving more explanation behind why he thinks he's garbage. Says Kudus is another athlete who can't score goals, might as well have kept Timo Werner. There's no doubt for me that Kudus is a better option than Timo Werner. Mickey Ward says, what about Harvey Elliott? Good goal scorer. Yeah, I talked about Elliott this morning in my video. Check that out if you haven't already. I like him. I worry a bit that he's a bit small, but he is definitely strong as well as being small. I just wonder whether Thomas Frank is going to want to bring a bit of physicality into the squad. But let's see what happens. Joshua, here we go, says, I think Kudus would be a great option. I believe Thomas Frank can turn his attitude around and focus it onto the pitch. Yeah, I think that's like I was saying earlier. Hopefully Thomas Frank will get an idea of whether Kudus is the right kind of player for him if they do get an opportunity to chat. Just before I go into some more comments, guys, thank you so much for watching. Do give this video a like if you haven't already. If you're not a subscriber to my channel, please do press that subscribe button. Daily Tottenham Talk and transfer news, as well as videos every day with every weekday with other Premier League transfer news as well. Joshua says they want 60 million for him. That is the rumor. Yeah, that's the latest that is being reported. Gary Riddell is sticking with this, saying no big players will be signed until Frank meets the team and figures out what he wants. Let's see what happens. That might well be the case, but it wouldn't surprise me if one did happen. We signed, who was it? I think we signed, I think I'm right in thinking we signed Solanke before Big Ange Postecoglou had taken a training session. Big Ange had been appointed as Spurs manager, but he hadn't taken a training session yet. So that is why sporting directors are, have jobs in the Premier League, because there has to be a continued strategy. But I will agree, I have been saying, and I do agree that in general, I don't think Tottenham are going to be able to do a lot of deals until Frank has watched the players in training and stuff. But I think with a player like Kudus, potentially, if Frank was really sure about him and there was a possibility of getting him in relatively early, he would try and do this. El Dante makes a good point here, saying, I prefer, I think you mean Xavi Simons there to Kudus. I mean, one thing you can say is that Kudus has at least shown, I like Xavi Simons, don't get me wrong, but Kudus has at least shown that he has performed in the Premier League. He can do it in the Premier League. So there's always more of a risk on a foreign player than there is on a player who's shown it. But let's see what happens. Tiger299 says, Barnaby, why is Eze agreed personal terms with Woolwich if he isn't going there, or hasn't he? I haven't heard anything saying he's agreed personal terms. But in reality, if Arsenal were genuinely interested in getting Eze, then I'm not sure personal terms would be an issue. I don't think personal terms would be an issue for wherever Eze wants to go. I think it's all probably with Eze based on, are Crystal Palace happy to sell him? Will someone reach the release clause, or at least get to a number that Palace are happy to go with? I think today the decision over Palace potentially playing in the Europa League or not has been postponed because it's all dependent on whether Lyon's relegation from Liga to Ligue 2 will be ratified or not. So that's going to go on a bit longer, and that might stop any Palace transfer sales as well. I would say they'll be waiting to find out what happens, basically. This is interesting from HodGod. Harvey Elliott competing with Johnson as a second striker. I can't see Johnson playing wide, in my opinion. Now, I haven't seen enough from Johnson anywhere other than wide right. I mean, sometimes he's played wide left, but he's played most of his time for Spurs wide right. I think he did play a bit more number 10 back in the Championship at Forest, and he was highly rated there, but I haven't seen enough of it. So I can't see him at the moment playing there, but who knows? Let's see what happens. Who knows? Cantab saying, deal will have to be done today, question mark, because of PSR. There are some reports that PSR is an issue in this for West Ham, but having heard a lot of the kind of interviews with Stefan Borson, who's the real expert on football finance and PSR, he doesn't seem to think West Ham are in a immediate danger with PSR. So that would make you think that they wouldn't have to get the deal done by today. But in general, all the reports are that they need to sell before they can buy. And Graham Potter wants to get players in other positions. So that's kind of that one. Tom Uppard says, will Harry Kane be back this season? Not to us in the Premier League, I don't think. Big Bad Rom, you sent a pretty nasty comment there. I don't know who it's to, but let's try and keep it clean if we can. Sai's going to go well, says Harvey Elliott would be an amazing signing. Yeah, I do wonder with Harvey Elliott. He's obviously very talented, but why hasn't it really worked out for him? Why can't he get in the team at Liverpool and hasn't been able to? You know, he's been there a fair amount of time. Yes, he's been young, but they've, you know, since he's been there, then they bought Gravenberch, who's coming above him, and Szoboszlai, who's coming above him. And I think physicality might be one of those reasons. Lee Baker cleverly says Kudus to the board if we get him. Yeah, and Ryan Glory says, I remember Kudus sent off for slapping Van der Ven last season. That's right. Well, Richarlison always gave us loads of issues when we played him, and then we got him on our side. Remember the old Richarlison versus Christian Romero issues. Spurs Nepal says, go and get Igor Paxia and Kudus, and we'll be excited by seeing him play on the wings and taking players on, I guess is what you're trying to say. I don't know anything about Igor. Let me know a bit about him. And SSJ says, who cares about his mentality? Rishi did the same thing. Tony Frost, thanks for your comment, mate, says, Levy talking about winning the league, then signing Kudus to replace an aging and outgoing Son is ridiculous. No other club aiming for top four would be taking Kudus. I think Newcastle have been really interested in Kudus, and they are in the top four. So I don't fully agree with that one. I think he's a talented player. I really do. Paul McGay says, that means we're the tuner to Man City, Chelsea, Liverpool's Apex Sharks. I mean, there is an element of that, I'm afraid. There is. Until we get proper investment within the club, by which I mean business investment, financial investment from companies who are willing to spend money kind of almost unsustainably. You know, we've known from ENIC since they bought us back in the early noughties that they are not a club who will spend their own money on Tottenham. They will help the club earn more money that they are then willing to spend on the team by growing through infrastructure. But they are looking and have been looking for a long time for more investment into the team. Let's see what else. SSJ says Kudus, Simons, Wharton. I have heard pretty reputable reports that they are all on our list, guys. And there are some people saying, believe it or not, that Tottenham are willing to push the boat out this summer and spend quite a lot of money. But I think some of that will depend on whether we're able to get rid of some of those players who they don't necessarily want going forward or may want to leave going forward, such as Son, Richarlison, maybe Christian Romero. There was a report, I'm sure you saw, that came from Argentina saying Spurs and Atletico Madrid have nearly agreed a deal around between 50 and 60 million pounds for Romero. That was quickly rebutted by what's his name? Michael, I can't remember his surname right now, but by the Sky Sports News journalist today. So I think that's some more kind of, you know, jiggery pokery being done probably by Christian Romero's agent, Atletico Madrid, trying to get stories into the press saying that Tottenham would accept a lower bid. Listen, the fact is, Harry Scarf says this all the time, and I agree with him. I think Christian Romero is like a 70, 80 million pound defender, and we shouldn't be accepting any less than that for him, as far as I'm concerned. Kookabar, interesting point here. 16 million for Kudus, no way. Cash flow is an issue. 30 million in installments plus Bissouma. Yeah, I mean, there has been some talk that Bissouma might be allowed to leave. I don't know about that. I don't know whether Thomas Frank would want to see Bissouma first. It's interesting. I could potentially see Bissouma at West Ham. He did obviously play under Graham Potter at Brighton, didn't he? Geek Jinx says, I would like us to shadow business more than jumping on hype. Sissoko is one of those hype signings that haunted us. Let's make better choices. I always felt with Sissoko that was very much a Daniel Levy signing. I didn't feel like it didn't make any sense at the time. Newcastle were so happy to get the money that we paid them. All their fans were like, oh, snap your hand off for that. So that one never made a lot of sense to me. Whereas Kudus, I think, is at least in a position where I feel like we are short of exciting ball-playing forwards who can take players on. This is an interesting one from Nico, giving the stats. Brennan Johnson, 0.23 goals a game. Kudus, 0.20 goals per game in the Premier League. But listen, one thing I don't think anyone should ever say about Brennan Johnson is he's not an elite finisher. He is an elite finisher. Getting in at the back post and being in the right place in the right time in the box. Not many players are better than Brennan Johnson at that, but it'd be interesting to see whether we are going to play to that style of football under Thomas Frank, because like I said earlier, Ange Postecoglou's tactics were basically all set up for that back post tap-in. And I think Frank will be trying to do something different. SSJ says Bissouma to Turkey. Yeah, possibly. There have been some reports of that. Terry Wright says Romero looks to be on his way out. Who replaces him? I don't think it looks that obvious at the moment, because it doesn't seem like anyone's going to be willing to pay the money that it would take as far as I'm concerned. Kev G. Eze and Kudus don't play the same position. No idea why folk think no Eze, so we're going for Kudus. This is the option to Mbeumo. Yeah, I think that might be a good point there, Kev. When I think about Eze, I think he could possibly play in the kind of middle as one of the three central midfielders, as well as potentially playing as a wide forward. I think he fits best in between that kind of wide left-hand forward and kind of left-sided, central midfielder in that kind of little half space. So I think he brings adaptability as well, Eze. But like I said earlier, I'm afraid to say it, but Eze coming to Spurs will only happen if Man City and Arsenal decide not to go for him. That's the reality. Shams, thank you for your comment, mate. Says, the truth is that Spurs fans, like most football fans, don't really understand the game. I'd go as far to say Ange is bigger than the club, as he surpassed its success for the past 40 years and 2 seasons. I feel like that's almost like 2 separate points. I don't think anybody or anything is bigger than the club, mate. But I wouldn't totally disagree with you in saying that most football fans don't understand the game. Listen, I have my opinions on the game. I played football to a half-decent level. I like to think I know a bit. But in reality, compared to people whose job it is and, go on coaching courses and stuff, I know nothing. Let's see this. Eric Callison says, this guy's totally underwhelmed the last 2 years. Why is this guy a priority? I don't understand. Johnson's completely outperformed and we haven't been happy with him. Yeah, interesting point. I think it depends what you look at. But yeah, certainly in the last season, Kudus has kind of underperformed and down tools a bit. And that's why I'd be worried about getting him. That's for sure. That is for sure. Sam Lloyd says, Kudus doesn't even play on the left side. Handy can play on the right and also central, but thought Eze was better due to being on the left and also central. I don't know if it's a choice, guys. I don't know if it's a choice. I mean, like I said, I don't think the Eze thing will come down to us. Nico says, Barnaby hating on his former employer. Yes, embarrassingly, I'm afraid to say I did work for West Ham for a while. Interesting club. Nice people. Interesting club. Geek Jink says this, actually, according to surveys, Spurs fans are generally smarter and personally more successful in life. I guess it's the hardship of pain and suffering. Yeah, that makes sense. It's you have to develop a thick skin and that'll help you in more professional matters. That's probably true. Here's an interesting one from El Dante. I think getting to the Champions League final was a bigger achievement than winning the Europa League, even if I would prefer to win trophies. Oh, that is a really interesting point. Yeah. I mean, I can't disagree. I don't agree and I don't disagree. I think, getting over the line to actually win a trophy is the hardest thing. But getting to the Champions League final, I'll be honest, I never thought in my lifetime that Tottenham would get to a Champions League final. So to have seen that was, that 3 weeks between the Ajax second leg and the Champions League final was, definitely up there with the best 3 weeks of my life. It was absolutely brilliant. Like watching all of the Arsenal fans absolutely cacking themselves. It was so magnificent. And then 22 seconds of the final is what it lasted. 22 seconds. But there you go. There you go. Carlson says, Frank likes inverted wings, so it makes sense with Kudus on the right. And if we don't sign left winger, Johnson on the left. That's an interesting point. Thank you, mate. Really appreciate it. And then we're getting into some chats in the comments about Harry Kane and players leaving after the Champions League. Let's see what else we got. El Dante says Kudus is better than João Pedro. João Pedro was apparently on the list as well. Eddie, thank you, mate. Says you speak the truth, Barnaby. I tried to. What else have you guys got here in the comments? Let me just double check. Just checking if any more reports are coming through. Got a few people feeling really confident. A few ITKs feeling really confident that the Kudus deal might happen. But you can never trust ITKs, not fully anyway. But like I said earlier, I think it's kind of exciting to just maybe potentially have a new exciting player come through. But let's see what happens. Sai's going to go well. Feels very strongly that Kudus, even caps lock strongly that Kudus would be an upgrade on Johnson. I think Johnson is a young player who has a lot still to learn, and I think his confidence will have grown massively after scoring the winner in the Europa League final and after that parade and stuff. So I still think he's going to be an exciting player, and it would not surprise me one little bit if Thomas Frank makes a beeline for Brennan Johnson early in this pre-season or season to talk about what an outstanding talent he is. I believe he's another player that Brentford were interested in getting in from Nottingham Forest when Tottenham got him. So alongside Archie Gray was as well. So don't be surprised if he does really, really well under Thomas Frank. Fabrizio Romano's just come out and said Aston Villa confirmed they're not activating the £40 million buyout clause for Marcus Rashford. What a strange career Marcus Rashford has ended up having in the second half of his 20s. Here's one. Chance and Cube, thank you so much for your comment, mate. Says the thing about Kudus is he wants to do everything by himself. He sometimes keeps the ball for a long time. Yeah, I mean, that I don't think is something that Thomas Frank would love. So that's an interesting one. Let's see what happens. Damien D'Amico is sending some abuse, I think, some trolling. That's interesting. Thanks, mate. Try and keep it clean if you can. A bit boring to be trolled on a Monday afternoon, realistically. Jay says, not going to lie, I'm happy with Kudus. Looks outstanding at West Ham. Yeah, that's if it happens. That would be good. Man Bear Pig says, we can't have this. We can't get the mentality. Players like Eze are totally in our league. And if we were willing to act like a Champions League team and pay some wages, we could get top-notch talent. Yeah, listen, I don't disagree with that. I think the reality is also, though, and I've mentioned this a fair few times, and people don't like to hear it, but it's true. We have to keep within a certain zone wage-wise because of the amount of debt we've got because of the stadium. Nobody wants to talk about it, but it's true. We probably have to keep within a certain amount of numbers in terms of our outgoings so that we can keep the deal that we agreed on the interest rates, et cetera, et cetera. So, it's not simple. I think all of these things are quite nuanced, guys. I really do. Geechink says Kulu was able to walk down the aisle, so might be back on the training ground soon. Yeah, that's right. He did just get married. Good lad. Good lad. Razzle Dazzle says I wanted Eze. I don't think necessarily it's over with the Eze one, but like I said, it'll be down to whether he wants to go to Man City or Arsenal. Geekjink says City's window is closing. Arsenal are going to have a turnover. Liverpool get found out, but not next year. So in my estimation, the next window for any clubs is 2 to 3 years. So yeah, that's because earlier you said Spurs' next opportunity to win the league will be in 2028. See what happens. Di, thank you for your comments. What is our transfer policy? 1 minute it's extortionate money for decent wingers. The next minute it's youngsters to help with club trained players. Last week was skin and now opportunistic deals. I think our transfer. Oh, excuse me, the doorbell's just rung and my dog's barking. I think the transfer policy is mostly young, hungry players and then them trying to top it off with kind of players with Premier League experience at the moment. I think that's kind of what we're looking at. That's how I see it anyway. What else have we got here? Damien says, you won't get Kudus for any less than the release clause, and he won't be heartbroken about not getting the move. You finished 17th last season. He'll hold out a year and we'll do a deal with a bigger club. Okay, you must be a West Ham fan. All right, fair enough. I don't know. All the reports are suggesting that actually West Ham might need the money and therefore be willing to do a deal on that release clause, but let's see what happens. Sam says, some people don't realize how good Kudus is. Fast, powerful, incredibly skillful. He'll be a brilliant signing. Okay, so you're a bit more positive than a lot than others. Oh, Geekjink saying Solanke signed 10th of August. Signed last season. Okay. Was Solanke... Oh, have I forgotten everything that much? So Solanke's... So it's the first season under Ange. He just had to deal with Son and Richarlison. And Richarlison was injured most of the time. Blimey. Yeah, Tarek saying Solanke was signed in the second season. Damien, the West Ham fan. Use are the same Wallies who believed Bowen was coming to use. Oh dear. Razzle Dazzle with a really good point here. Who was the last youngster we actually developed and made better? That's one thing that I have to say that I'm looking forward to from Thomas Frank. I think we will be improving our young players again. That's what I'm really looking forward to, because I actually agree with you. I don't think we have improved young players for a fair amount of time. Tarek, they're correcting me. Okay, Vicario and Maddison were signed beforehand. Thank you, mate. I appreciate that. Got that one wrong. Apologies. Phil Martin, thanks for your comments. We need to get a move on. Kudus is okay and Frank must want him. I prefer Eza, but sadly that won't happen. Should have got in the moment the window opened. I'm just going to say this as well. I know it's, again, another thing we probably don't want to think, but the reality is we don't know what happens in the transfer market in the background. And there's just so many different moving parts to any transfer deal, aren't there? That the reality is we never really know what's going on. So, you know, I appreciate you saying we should have got him the first moment the window opened. I just don't think it works like that. And when it does work like that for clubs like Man City and in this summer's instance, Liverpool, you know, they've had their managers in for a long time. They've been lining up these deals for a long time, having the conversations while the season's going on. Tottenham, because of what happened with Big Ange, in reality, haven't been able to do that. That's just my thoughts, though. Who knows? Jay Ashraf, thank you, mate. Says Barnaby, why do you think Spurs have backed off pursuing Eza? If that report is true, then I think it's because they found out that Eza wants to go somewhere else. I'm afraid to say. Marty Mack says Kudus is bang average. So many times the ball bobbles off him in control and movements with the ball will be enough for early baldness. Eza has been there for years and still no movement. FML. And Man Bear Pig says, okay, then outbid Woolwich for Eza. He clearly isn't refusing to join Spurs. I think that's another thing. I just think, like I said, we don't know what's going on behind the scenes, guys. And all of the parties, other than the buying club, are looking to milk as much out of any potential deal. And on top of that, with Eza and Crystal Palace, like I said earlier, the reality is, I'm afraid, Palace don't know right now if they're going to be in the Europa League or not. So they're waiting to find that out, because they will get more money into their club if they're in the Europa League. If they are indeed kind of thrown out of the Europa League for the owners owning too many clubs, then maybe it's more likely they'll sell Gahey, Eza, Wharton in that instance. I mean, it wouldn't surprise you, would it, based on what you know about Daniel Levy, if Daniel Levy is sniffing around Crystal Palace for all these players because he knows there's a chance they might need to sell if they get chucked out of the Europa League that they should be in. I personally think Palace should absolutely be in the Europa League. They deserve it. They won the FA Cup, and it would be out of order if they were chucked out of it just because they've got an idiotic American owner who doesn't know how to do the rules. Deary me. You kind of really see the difference between the haves and the have-nots in football, don't you, when Chelsea sell their women's team to themselves and 2 hotels to themselves for hundreds of millions of pounds to get around PSR. Aston Villa today, it's been announced, have sold part of their women's team to themselves and their car park, a venue they've created in their car park, they've sold to themselves to create money so they don't get stung by PSR. And then at the other end, the have-nots, Crystal Palace, who are owned by a dude who couldn't even work out that if Palace won the FA Cup, they wouldn't get into the Europa League because he also owns Lyon. Like, that is the difference between being able to afford amazing accountants and lawyers who can go through the fine print of all these rules and regulations, and then Crystal Palace, who presumably can't afford that in the same way that Man City can with the 115. The 115 with Man City, oh, we're not hearing anything about it anymore. Just like we're not hearing anything about Chelsea's what Chelsea admitted. They admitted paying people off the books under Roman Abramovich. And they should have points penalties for this, but it's all been kicked into the long grass because they can afford the best lawyers. The UAE have more money than the Premier League, so they've been able to afford the best lawyers in the world to kick the 115 into the long grass. Meanwhile, Chelsea and their lawyers are negotiating with the Premier League for what will end up being just a fine, I'm sure. And do you know what? It would not, I'm sorry, I'm on a bit of a rant here, but it would not surprise me one bit if Man City, for the 115 charges of financial irregularities, only end up getting a fine. And when that happens, I feel like there'll be a part of me that'll be like, we might as well all give up. Because Tottenham under Daniel Levy, you know, give him as much stick as you want, but he's tried to run the club under the rules of the Premier League, under the rules of FFP and PSR. And he's grown the club sustainability within the rules, which is you grow your club through infrastructure, earn your own revenue, spend that on your team to stop nation states. It was brought in to try and stop nation states from just buying up football clubs or to stop clubs from spending too much money and going out of business. And as a result, you know, Tottenham have tried to do that all the right way. And meanwhile, Chelsea have just absolutely taken the mickey, and so have Man City. And it's one of the things that annoys me most about football. Anyway, I'll get back into the comments. Neil Shafton says, talk is cheap, so until the dotted line is signed and T's crossed and I's, it's just speculation. Yeah, it is speculation, but what is, for most of the reality of being a football fan is kind of speculation and gossip and the things you chat about down the pub with your mates. And that's what I feel like this is. That's why I'm talking about it. So thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. TTID with an interesting one here. Johnson would be better off as a left back. Oh, left back in the changing room. He's bloody awful. He literally scored the winner for us in the Europa League final and scored 20 goals last season. He's not bloody awful. I'm sorry, but you know, he's just not. And he's also incredibly young. And El Dante sticking up for him here. Johnson again, Olele, so underappreciated. He's not the best, but did very well for us. He may surprise us all. He may surprise us all. Kookaburra says, Aston Villa has a PSR issue. Any news on Jacob Ramsey? I did see some reports earlier that maybe Spurs would be interested in trying to take Jacob Ramsey, but now that Aston Villa have sold themselves their car park and their women's team, maybe it won't have to happen. It won't be able to happen, sorry. El Dante, good point here. It's good to have a player or two that wind up the other team, like we had Lamella and have Richarlison and Romero. I agree with that, I have to say. La Isla Bonita says, Barnaby, let's say we spend proper money. Which clubs can we beat to signings then? Well, I think when the day that Abramovich bought Chelsea, for instance, Chelsea weren't a club who could get the best players. And then he came in and said, money is no object. And then straight away, if you're willing to pay the wages, you can get the players. The reality is, it's can you pay more wages than anyone else is being willing to pay? And if you can, they'll come to you straight away. That's the reality. Players come for the money. But I don't think that's going to happen until we get investment. Dreadwolf says, more clickbait BS. He's not close. Why don't any of you be honest? We spoke to his agents and he's open to a move. Thank you, mate. Appreciate your engagement. The reality is, I've said this many times, say it again, YouTube is a search engine. It's a search engine. So you have to find ways to get your videos to be seen. I'm only going off what numerous reputable journalists have gone and said, that he's open to the transfer, has the potential of being close if Tottenham gets £60 million. I wouldn't overthink it, mate. I wouldn't overthink it. And I appreciate all of you watching and engaging. What else? Oh, that's right. Michael Bridge. Yeah, that's right. Thank you for correcting me. Appreciate that. Loads of you commenting today. I really appreciate your support, guys. Please, if you haven't already, do give this video a like on YouTube. Please do press that subscribe button if you're not already a subscriber to my channel. Daily Tottenham transfer news as well as Premier League transfer news across the board. Cantab, we were talking about Moussa Sissoko earlier. Says he was liked by Poch. I think he was liked by Poch eventually. Like eventually when we got loads of injuries and we needed to use Sissoko down the middle of the pitch. I think Poch liked him then, but not in general. I didn't think he did at the start. I didn't feel like Poch felt he was his kind of signing. Eddie asked, would you sell Maddison for, say, 40 million? I wouldn't, no. Absolutely not. Good point here from Robert Yee. Kudus has a Danish connection from Nordjylland. Likely been scouted by both Thomas Frank and Ange Postecoglou. No, do you mean Johan Lange? Surely, Johan Lange. Good point. Paul Savori says, sell Odebear, lol. People like, let's replace a 19 with a 20-year-old. Don't agree with that. Let's see what else you guys are saying. SSJ says, I'd take Rashford here. I wouldn't. I think he weirdly is just going for that. He wants to get a move to Barcelona, strangely, Marcus Rashford. I don't know. Maybe he'll get a loan deal. Who knows? But it seems unlikely. Daniel Pender says, not really a shock transfer if we're settling for an average player. Sounds like Spurs to me. Okay. All right. There's a little bit of negativity today, but that's all right. Kernow says, I think we're overcomplicating things. Make an offer, but or not move on. We must try and prioritise buying Fofana and Miku Tadzi from Lyon if they're relegated. Yeah, a lot of people talking about their players available at Lyon if they get relegated that we could potentially pick up on the cheap. Anyway, guys, listen, I've really enjoyed this chat. I'm going to go off. If there's any more news or more concrete news this evening about that or any other transfer stories, I will jump on another live stream. But really enjoyed it. Please do give it a like if you haven't already. Please do subscribe to the channel. And also, if you like my content, there's a link in the description box below for the Football Content Awards. If you could give me a nomination there in a couple of the categories, that would be really helpful, guys. Thank you so much and enjoy the rest of your day. Come on, you Spurs.